Hello there. So my name is Christy Honeysett and I live in Wollongong and I'm married to a lovely man named Will. We have three children. They're aged 12, 10 and 8. And I am delighted to speak to you today about marriage and family. I think it's a really important topic. And for me, it's something that I've often thought about in terms of my understanding of God. And also the fact that my understanding of God has grown so much through marriage and family life. And I think that's something to be celebrated and something to be talked about. So that's probably why I'm so excited to be here. I was raised in a wonderful family, and my mum and dad, they really love each other. They have an interesting relationship. They love each other. But I saw my mum doing lots and lots of hard work around the home, and it seemed like a service without reward. And so for me, marriage and family life initially was not very attractive. I thought it just looked like something that was just giving with never getting something in return. And so when I met a fabulous young man when I was 16, and he walked into church one day and he was good looking. And that night was my 16th birthday party. And I am a bit of an extrovert. And so I invited him along to my party, him and his brother. And they came along. We became friends. A couple of years later, fast forward, we started dating. And I really loved him, but I really was not ready for marriage yet. And I felt like it was quite a serious kind of relationship. So I decided to go off and do a year of youth ministry down in Melbourne, which I loved and I found excellent for my growth as a person and figuring out who I was. Along the time I was off in youth ministry too, I was also just trying to discern my vocation. Came back, we dated again, second time. And again, after about a year, we actually got engaged, but I still didn't feel ready. And I wasn't feeling any sense of joy thinking about marriage moving forward. And I thought, really need to spend a bit more time, discerning this, figuring out if this is my vocation. So again, I ended up going off for 3 years, working in youth ministry in Perth, which again was incredibly rewarding for me as a person. Really hard for my now ex-fiance, who essentially decided to wait for me that whole time. He was so sure that he was going to marry me. Anyway, I had this moment on a retreat. This is way back in 2004. And I remember praying and realizing that I could be just as holy in married life as I could in religious life. And I realized I'd had a bit of a blockage in my mind until that point, thinking that consecrated life for me was the only path for holiness. But God was calling me to marriage. And I had this epiphany, this moment of, oh my goodness, I'm called to get married and to live a life of holiness through marriage and family and be open to service, which, to be honest, I was pretty, my whole world revolved around me back then. And so the concept of serving others and also being open to children, serving, my children and loving and giving, having that self-sacrificial love for them, that was hard for me to, make a decision in that direction, but it ended up being the most wonderful decision. So the same guy that I then dated 3 times, engaged twice, we've now been married for 16 years, and it's been a really wonderful, wonderful marriage. And the love that I had for him and also the love he had for me back in those days has grown in enormous ways. So I just want to let you know that marriage is a fabulous vocation of holiness. And I know other speakers have already touched on that, but it's been important in my journey. So I just wanted to share that with you. So I'm going to share a little bit about 3 points about marriage that really stand out to me. The first one that I love speaking about, I did mention this before, but I'm a teacher as well as a youth minister. And I love speaking about this in Year 10 class in particular. We talk about marriage and we talk about love always generating life. That love is always willing the good of the other person. Love is always putting other people first. And so naturally in marriage and family, when there is love, it always generates life. Now, it's not always life as in life in the womb, but it's life in many different ways. I'm going to share my screen with you now, see if I can get a PowerPoint up and just share a little bit about the 3 points that I'd like to touch on today. So this is me and my hubby. We love going away every now and again. So last year we went away to Hunter Valley and got to go up in a hot air balloon and just got to spend time with each other. And there we are having a kiss. So the power of love that generates, and love always generates. So this is us and our 3 kids. And of course, our love has generated life in our 3 fabulous children. It's also generated life in the way that we see the world and the way we see others, and in our hearts, the way we can respond to the needs of others. That God really has poured out this love for us and with us, and that then we can really share that with the world. So the path to holiness taken by a father or mother involves growing in their love for each other and in the love they give to their children. The best thing a father can do for his children is to continually grow in love for their mother and vice versa. So part of my job as a married woman is to continually grow in love with my husband. What a great gift that is part of my role, part of my path to holiness. So this is us up in a hot air balloon, and of course we don't do these kind of extravagant things all the time, but we just love affirming our love for each other and really dedicating quality time with each other, just to be able to recognize the gift that God has given us in each other. So the call consists in sharing with God the power of a love that generates life, both in the flesh and in the spirit. The love of a man and woman is always fruitful, even when there are no children or when the parents become elderly. It's fruitful because it gives life, because of the gift of self in a relationship and the life choices. So we have some friends who have not been able to conceive. And so although they're fabulously, faithfully married, they haven't been able to have children, but they give life in so many ways. Their relationship really does bring about God's love into the world, that other people understand the faithfulness and the care of God for them because they see the way this couple live out their marriage vows. I'm really inspired by people like that in my life. This morning as I was praying, I felt drawn to the Gospel of John, and it's John chapter 15, verse 16. You did not choose me, no, I chose you, and I commissioned you to go out and bear fruit that will last, so that the Father will give you anything you ask him in my name. My command to you is to love one another. So in my life, and in the life of every married person, in the life of every family, we're all called because God has chosen us. He's chosen us and commissioned us to go out and to bear fruit, and bear fruit in many different ways, and fruit that will last. And then that final command that happens all the way throughout the Bible is to love one another, which, as I mentioned, is hard work, because true love is willing the good of the other person, is putting the other person first. Not in a way that's super unhealthy for me, for example, but it is hard because naturally we are self-focused. Naturally, we do want to put ourselves always first. But love is about sacrifice and taking care of others. And that's why not only is it a fabulous gift to the world, but it's also, a real path in holiness for each individual. So I want to talk a little bit about Amoris Laetitia, which is a fabulous document written by Pope Francis. And I really wanted to focus on the fun stuff, the procreative and unitive stuff. So throughout Amoris Laetitia, it talks about conjugal love. So that means sexual love. And that, of course, is a fabulous, wonderful gift that is truly finds its home within the sacramental love of man and woman. So these are some quotes that I just wanted to mention. So the first quote says, true love between husband and wife involves mutual self-giving, includes and integrates the sexual and affective dimension. So that means both the sexual and emotional dimensions in accordance with God's plan. So when we give both our emotions, our intellect, our hearts, our bodies to each other, that's actually living out God's plan. when we have such a gift of fabulous sex in marriage, a sex that is willing the good of the other person and wanting the other person to really grow in love and in holiness, and always willing the best emotionally for the other person. This is part of God's plan. How fabulous is that? And after being married for 16 years, more and more I just reflect on this gift that is, the renewing of our vows that we do every time we make love, that is a real gift from God. And that shows us just the tenderness and the love of God, that we would be able to have this deep expression of unity, which sometimes can also lead to a child. So there's this unitive aspect of sexual love, and there's also this procreative aspect where God actually invites you to co-create a child. It's pretty amazing, mind-blowing stuff. And Amoris Laetitia talks about in the encyclical Humanae Vitae, which was written a little while ago, it was brought out the intrinsic bond between conjugal love and the generation of life. That these two go together, that when you're having a fabulous marriage and you're really aware of the gift of sex, then it naturally does lead to generation of life. And, as I mentioned before, sometimes that generation of life is through actually co-creating children with God, the procreative kind of side of things. And sometimes it's that unitive side that then you can go out and share that love with the world. I hope that makes sense. And the last quote that I thought was really fabulous was, marriage based on an exclusive and definitive love becomes an icon of the relationship between God and his people, and vice versa. Exclusive and definitive love. Now, for me, part of my journey was that we had such a long time between when we first started dating and then when we got married, because, I broke up with my now fabulous husband 3 times, got engaged twice, etc. His faithfulness to me for the last 20 years really speaks to me of God's love. The faithfulness that he shows when I'm sick, the faithfulness he shows, when our daughter broke her ankle early in the year, and being a good husband and father at those tough times in family life, it really reveals God's love to me more and more. And so hopefully our relationship then reveals God's love to the world more and more. There's this beautiful invitation for married couples and families to then become an icon, become a symbol, become a sign of the relationship between God and his people. This closeness, this tenderness. And I just think that's something worth celebrating. I'm going to go on now into the merciful and gracious love that God invites us to experience. So in the Old Testament, there's a word hesed or chesed. That's the most commonly used term for mercy and love. And it means tenderness made up of faithfulness, assurance, initiative, and trust that affirms and accompanies, doesn't abandon, remains steady, conveys reassurance. And this is the love that God has for us. And this is the love then that's also expressed in marriage and family life. Later on in Raham, which I'm going to mention the scripture that comes from, Raham used in Exodus chapter 34, verse 5, which means the womb, the place in which the life of child is formed and grows. It's a love that forms the body, that preserves, that protects, that nourishes and welcomes the existence of another person. And the scripture that uses that term is, the Lord is compassionate and gracious, slow to anger, abounding in love. He will not always accuse, nor will he harbour his anger forever. He does not treat us as our sins deserve or repay us according to our iniquities. And this is the kind of love that we're invited to live out in marriage and family life, that we're invited to live out when the other person lets us down, when we're going through hard times, when as a parent I've let my children down, or as a child they've let me down in the way that they've been behaving or treating each other. We're called to be merciful and gracious, to have this tenderness and faithfulness, to not abandon each other, to nourish each other, to protect each other. In Amoris Laetitia, it talks about this tender and delicate intimacy between a mother and child, like a babe sleeping in its mother's arms after being nursed. There's a closeness that is conscious and not simply biological. drawing on this image the psalmist sings, I have calmed and quieted my soul like a child quieted at its mother's breast. And this is me with our firstborn, and he's just loved shoving his face into my chest, just, nuzzling in there, not necessarily just for milk, but just for closeness. And this is the closeness that we're encouraged to experience with God and within family life. This is my last point, is we cannot do life by ourselves. We need family and community. So we need other people around us to survive, to love, to grow in holiness, to grow as a person. And that's been really true of me and my husband. That times when we've been, finding it hard to love each other, or finding it hard to really move forward, through hard times, we've had good people around us. We've really chosen some good people in our lives that have helped us along the way. And that's super, super important. So for you, if you're struggling at the moment because your family circumstance is not ideal, which is so true of many of us, or if you're finding it really hard to love someone in particular in your family, have a think about whether you have some support out there that you could draw on. Is there a good friend you could speak to? Do you have someone in your parish or in your diocese or in your local prayer group, for example, or at your school, that you could then ask for help, ask for prayer, ask for support, ask for advice? Because it's only because of these excellent people alongside us in the journey, and they haven't been perfect, just as we haven't been perfect, that then our marriage has really moved forward. So I'm going to stop sharing now. And I just want to leave you with a little thought. Again, one of my other favourite scriptures, and it's from Hosea, and it's chapter 11. And it's God talking to Israel. I myself took them by the arm, but they did not know that I was the one caring for them, that I was leading them with human ties, with leading strings of love, that with them I was like someone lifting an infant to his cheek, and that I bent down to feed him. So have a think about that for a moment. God is actually taking us by the arm, gently, and leading us, teaching us to walk, moving us forward in marriage and family life. God is the one that's caring for us and providing for us, even when maybe we can't see it, because that's part of our journey, is that we can't always see how God is working. God's the one caring for us and leading us with human ties, leading us through each other, through marriage and family. God is actually leading and loving us, leading strings of love. And with us, God is like someone lifting an infant to his cheek, bending down to feed them. I'm going to leave that with you. Love always generates, that we're called to have this tender and gracious love, and that we're not supposed to do it alone. We need to have our family and community around us to help us move forward. Thanks.